Thank you. Yes. So yes, hello everybody. Welcome to the second session today. I don't know if anybody was in the first one. Our co-host Manal was in there this morning, so she knows a little bit about what's going to happen. Just to let you know about the objective of this, the IAF, following on from a survey with its members, discovered that members would like some more business-focused input or business-focused activities. So one of the things that the IAF have put in place is the Facilitator Buyer's Guide, so which is a consultation with buyers of facilitation to know what they want concretely, and an opportunity also for facilitators, of course, to maybe guide the buyers on what they should be looking out for. So I used the example this morning, you know, if you phone a facilitator at 6 o'clock in the evening and they promise that they will be there, no problem, at 9 o'clock the following morning, it's probably not a facilitator that you're going to get, for example. All right. So this morning's session has been recorded, so you will be able to catch that at some point. It'll be sent out on the website. As I said, our co-host for today is Manal, and we are also joined by our panelists, James Gumbel, who's in the technical sector, Susan Bennett, who is from the environmental sector, and Roberta said she is in the drugs business. So they are our three panelists today. So what we're going to do, first of all, we're going to have a short breakout room. Manal is going to send you out into a breakout room, and I'm going to give you two questions. What question brings you here today? And the second question is, what are your expectations of today? It's a very short breakout room, two questions. When you come back, we will ask you each breakout group to share one question from your breakout room and put all the other information in the chat. And when you go into your breakout room, have a look at the top to see which breakout room you're in room number 1, 2, 3, or 4, 5, or 6, so that when you come back, we will do it in the order. So that's it. Okay, are we ready to go, Manal? Perfect. So I think it's about 3 or 4 people per room. See you later.
I think H.E. is maybe calling in from 2 places.
Okay. Now, how do I do this? So we will suspend this recording.
Before, I guess I will jump.
Sorry,
I will jump in as someone handling the torch. I think what came out, the theme was to learn from each other and how to position ourselves as a facilitator and kind of describing the services that we provide.
Okay, thank you, Javier. And group number 5. I think we have a question from group number 5. Who was in group 5? I don't know if we checked.
Cameron, Fabio,
Yes, that was me.
Laura.
I don't think we had specific questions. The shared piece is exactly the same as what other people have shared. It's about curiosity and interest in client perspective, since we tend to talk to the ones we've been successful at selling to, not to the ones that we haven't been.
Okay, thank you, Cameron. Okay, so now our panelists are going to introduce themselves. I told you where they were from, which sectors they were from, but I didn't tell you what they were going to speak about. James, who's going to present himself in a moment, is going to speak about chaotic procurement, his experience with buying facilitators and chaotic procurement. He will tell you more. Suzanne's experience with tricky questions, and Roberta's experience will be about connecting the dots. They will tell you more. So James, would you like to give us your 1-minute introduction, please?
Hi there. Yes, so I'm James Gumbel from Expand. So we are a software company that work with government teams. So we basically work with government expenditure and government projects. And we work on how economic development programs should be put together. So how businesses should be supported, how they should be doing this. And because of this, we end up having to have large workshops and large facilitations, large gatherings of different city stakeholders together to get what they need, so how they can actually develop sectors. And we put in lots of tenders, lots of R&Ds, and lots of projects. So that's
Okay, thank you, James. Suzanne.
Hi everyone, I work for the British government for the Environment Agency. I'm currently working on a project to improve water quality over the next 7, 14 up to 100 years forward. The Environment Agency has a really big remit, so I've been involved in facilitating sessions with farmers, people to do with nuclear new build and flood resilience, building flood schemes. So there's a lot of high conflict work that we get involved in and need to commission facilitators for. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Roberta.
Hi, I work, I used to joke that I work in a drug company. The company that I'm working since 23 years now is producing therapies for different pathologies. It is a French company with international headquarters. And we are using a lot this service of facilitation because we provide trainings and facilitation through an internal training team. But also we collaborate with facilitators from outside the company whenever we want to introduce fresh blood into the mindset of the people and in their skills and knowledge. So facilitation, it's a common keyword for us.
Okay, thank you, Roberta. Okay, so we're going to go down in the order again. James is going to give us some input about his experience of chaotic procurement and acquiring facilitators. If you have any questions, we've planned, James will speak for about 10 minutes or so. We've planned 5 minutes during each speaker. So if we'll have more time at the end as well for you to give input as well to the buyers, our panelists. But if you do have a question, please don't hesitate to put up your hand, put it in the chat if you prefer. And we have a structure, but it's flexible. All right, so James, it's over to you. Tell us about chaotic procurement and your experience of buying facilitation, please.
So I've been involved in probably getting and working with facilitating teams probably for about 13 years. And I've done this a lot within the large software, within the IT sector. You've done it through further education sector. So I've done it for large scale IT projects for the public sector through to further education for where they develop. So further education projects where they're working with businesses and supporting businesses. But I've also got my own company and we've also bid for work and we've also been bidding for large scale projects. So what we tend to find is that I'll go straight to the point really of this, is that we tend to, when we find out, we act as a middleman for a lot of the work that comes from facilitators, is that there'll be tenders that are out there for large pieces of government work, and we as a company will bid for it. However, there will be a work package in there where they need to have some facilitation in this to actually work to understand the needs, or for the client to feel that they've been listened to, or that all the requirements have been gathered, or that all the stakeholders have been engaged. And this is usually a large component of the work that we bid for. And we bid for this through the tender process, through the R&D process, and also directly we get engaged to do some of this work because we've done it on a recurring basis. However, the process of finding out about these tenders and actually working and engaging with the people who will be on prospective work. So we find out about if we found out about a project today, we would have 2 weeks to complete the application form to bid for this work. And it's 2 weeks of effort, 2 weeks large effort to put the application form together. And this piece of work might be 6 months down the line, and it's still very nebulous about what's actually going to happen and what's going to come out from this. So we can't promise that there will be 5 days of work or 4 days of four large chunks of work. At the time when we find out about this piece of work that's coming up, it's still very much evolving 2-week process to respond to, should we go for this tender or should we not go for this tender? But there will be a piece in there that says we need to actually have a workshop or have user journeys. The types of workshops I will deal with probably be up to the maximum of 50 people for facilitate. So we would have probably around, we procure for around 50 people, probably would be around a table or at a session. And we will, it's usually quite a chaotic experience for those 2 weeks whilst we're putting in this tender to do this work and to win this work. And it's perspective, because we don't know that we're going to win this work. So we can't guarantee to anybody that, by the way, we are definitely going to be able to pay you and give you money to do this. But at the time that we submit the application, we need to know, we need to have someone on our books that is qualified or that is able to do this and that is able to actually work with, will be able to commit to delivering these workshops, delivering this work for us. So we have a concept of placeholder. We usually have a placeholder facilitator or people that we've worked with in the past that we can drag down their details, and we've got an ongoing agreement with these people that we will put their names into these bids or these pieces of work, and we will have an agreed rate that we will price them into this. However, once we've done this once, because it's such a tight turnaround to actually get these CVs, get the work history, get the person's experience and how they would approach this, we usually have a template placeholder of a facilitator that we will put into our bids. And when it comes round to it, we will then, if it comes out, if the work actually does come off, then fantastic. Then we've got an opportunity to engage with that facilitator properly to work out, will they fit into this piece of work? So we do have a couple of different flavors of facilitator that we have for the different types of work. And the types of work that we tend to get this for would be business case development for government, where they require to get all the evidence, they require evidence and feedback about what they're trying to achieve, or they've got a large pot of money they're trying to spend and they just need to know that this is going to happen. But what we need from the facilitator really is someone who can actually, what we usually tend to find from our facilitators is that we need someone that can just drive some of the requirements gathering processes, or drive some of the conversation, or to be able to capture everything that's going on. And it's usually a known quantity that we will engage with to basically put into the tenders. So it's something that we have our rate cards, and that we have our people that we will know. So again, it's who we've engaged with in the past that we will be able to know, that we could turn around and say, by the way, do you mind us putting you into this a couple of times? So usually the first and the second time that we put someone into a tender or a work package that we're going to work on, it's usually someone that we've asked permit, we've gone through the process, we've validated them, we've got their CV. But once we know that we can work with this person, or that this person is happy for their details to be provided, and we've got that working relationship with them, it did tend to be that that person becomes our first port of call, because we can rely on them to have a quick turnaround within that quite chaotic period of procurement. Because the procurement period is such a stressful period that you're trying to essentially write a dissertation's worth of text to secure work that might prospectively happen in 6 months' time. It's having someone that that can be flexible and can be responsive, and would understand that there isn't necessarily going to be a commitment or a complete commitment from them that they will do this, but essentially that they could do this in the future. So essentially what we found is having an accurate LinkedIn profile, an extremely up-to-date LinkedIn profile that we can extract quite quickly, that we're not having to repeat the process 15 times of having to fill in their background and details. A LinkedIn profile, essentially, there's a feature on there called export PDF. It's absolute lifesaver for us, essentially, at the 11th hour, whilst we're completing what feels like completing a dissertation at usually 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I don't know if any of you've worked in the procurement process whatsoever. It's absolutely chaotic, and it usually involves absolutely everyone feeling exhausted for a long period of time. But you get better at it. So once you've done this a few times, having those blocks of people that you know that you can trust, that you can pull onto those proposals, it becomes a lot easier. So and out of sheer laziness, and I'm just going to admit this, out of sheer laziness, you probably won't go back out once you found out about this, because you've been able to trust that person, or they've been able to be that responsive, you will probably want to go back to using that person. And it's such a strength. Yeah, as I say, I've gone through a couple of these recently, so I'm probably sounding a bit exasperated because I'm probably reliving some quite recent stress.
James, James, just a question. How do facilitators get on your placeholder list?
It's usually that we've met them through conferences, and it's usually friends of friends, and it is conferences and the networking, unfortunately, giving you the old answers. Blind LinkedIn requests are awful. I get hundreds of them all the time, and warm introductions are much better. So speaking to someone through email who will actually speak on your, like someone who knows me properly could actually get through to me a lot better. It's just actually getting to know the companies that are actually putting in the tenders and actually putting in the work. So there are actually on the public sector lists, there are also lists of suppliers and people that they will use that are already pre-approved providers. So if you can do a bit of digging around, you can try and find who you know that would know these people, that knows them well, or who are speaking to. But when we found that once we've been added onto people's tenders as well, we kind of go with the same people. We do tend to go with the same people because it's become a known quantity. But I've also arranged things where it's been tech focused, or where it's been tech business development focused. Sorry, I've lost all track of time, so I don't know what I'm doing for time at the moment.
Don't worry, we keep an eye on that.
That's right.
They will mute you at a certain moment.
So we use people who've done lean business model canvases, people who've got a mechanism in place that we can that we need to have people who understand the waterfall methodology, people who understand some of the technical methodologies that they can actually facilitate sort of the way that tech talks and works. So having the basic frameworks to say when we've engaged someone, it's a case of, do you know how to do the business model canvas? Do you know how to do this specific technique? Because it's within the tender that we need someone that can do that. And we've usually got a broad figure around about what we can actually afford to pay these people. But sometimes it might seem a bit insulting what we can do, but unfortunately it's the actual bid that we're putting in. But it does mean that if you've become that friendly face, that you've agreed to go in at a terrible rate for the first time, and we didn't win it, we're likely to put you back into it when we can actually afford it at a much better rate. And I'm not saying that you should accept a lower rate, but I'm saying that if you actually say that you're happy to be included on something on this occasion, if they don't win it, then you're likely to be included on the second and third and fourth when they actually do.
Okay. I think we'll turn it over to any questions you may have on the floor. Any of our participants have any questions that you would like to ask James? I have one or two here, but I'll leave it to the floor first.
Yes, James, I have a question. Thank you for sharing all this good stuff. Do you also look for, in regards to what kind of experience they have? I know we're moving into a more of a hybrid environment where there is facilitation that is asked to be, if you can facilitate on a hybrid environment, that came across in some of your requirements?
Yeah, it's so we've got we had throughout the pandemic, that's a phrase that we've been saying too many times, but hey, we've had to bid for things and not be sure that we could ever do things face to face, or whether they were going to be completely online or what's happening. So having people who can come up with ideas of how they would actually run it and how they would facilitate, how they would actually make that happen to be hybrid, or just having that we can actually hand over that piece to them. That's great. We can do a lot of it ourselves as well. It's just the fact that it's a lot of headaches for us to actually do this. We don't, I could actually run some of the sessions if I really wanted to, but I wouldn't get the best results out of it. And I would need someone who can actually capture the information better. there'll be stuff that would be missed. So the people can't do it all. They do need the help to actually even do some of the lifting of suggesting that, yes, we could potentially we could actually put this platform in place for you to capture this or to do this. Whatever you can do to reduce the stress is great. The first barrier of essentially being in the tender and actually how you're going to do it, that's great. So if you can have a small bio that's ready to be sent to someone, that can be included as onto the tender, then that's usually that's the best thing.
Thank you,
James. Thank you, Javier. Anybody else have any questions that they would like to?
There's one question in the chat
Okay.
from Dan. James, do you see potential clients offer an inaccurate RFP? In other words, they ask for things they ultimately don't want or need.
Yes, all the time. But the unfortunate thing is, so that's where we take a strategic view about what we go for, because there's a lot of them that will actually go to the letter of they've put it out for this and they will hire this. They have asked for ABC, and they will only accept applications for ABC. So it's a case of whether you go with companies that are actually brave enough to say, well, actually what you need is this, and we'll put this in. And we did this recently. So we actually put something in that was quite brave. And again, as I said, it's about 2 or 3 weeks of writing a dissertation between a team of you, and you're up until 4 o'clock in the morning. So you're taking a gamble at actually going against what they've asked for. They want a blue square, but you've now proposed a purple triangle because it's better. It's exactly what they want. But unfortunately, the time to talk about to them is to actually engage beforehand. So it's engaging before they've put this out is usually the best one. Otherwise, it is a huge gamble, and I think in terms of costs, to us, it's about £10,000 for each one that we actually go for in terms of hours that we could be sort of bidding for and doing work elsewhere if we were doing our stuff. So it actually there is a material cost to doing this and putting the risk of it's risky to basically go back and say, yes, you should do this instead. It's unfortunately, at the earlier days, we as a company were not able to do that. We're now getting cheeky enough that we're actually probably able to do that, and we've just been successful in convincing people that they should do things differently. But it's a lot of work, especially in the public sector.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions for James before we move on to Suzanne? I have a few questions for James, but I'll come back to them later on. They're not trick questions, but okay. So if you have no more questions, we're going to move across now to Suzanne. And Suzanne is going to tell us a little bit about her experience of applying facilitation. Suzanne,
okay.
Up to you.
Thank you, David. Yeah, I've got tricky questions which prospective facilitators need to know. So when you're commissioning a facilitator, you'll get a good end result if you think about these things and put those perhaps into your request for a facilitator. So the first one is planning time. It can't be underestimated the time that it can take to pull a facilitated event together. And I'm thinking maybe in real time would have been probably a day's session, but these days you can probably do in 2.5 hours, but the planning time is still the same. So we generally allow 4 to 6 weeks for that planning. That's because of people's calendars. Sometimes you need to deliberate over what it is you're trying to get at the end of the session. So 4 to 6 weeks does sound an age, but do start that planning ahead, especially if you need to actually commission a facilitator and then start planning with them. One thing that David has mentioned in the past is if you're phoning someone up the night before, then it's not a facilitator that you need, it's a master of ceremonies. So be very clear what you want your facilitator to do. Essentially, they're helping a group of people to work through a tricky problem to get to an outcome that everyone feels that they've had a stake in and bought into. So the facilitator does not need to be a subject matter expert, but they need to have those skills to bring out the best in people, whether it's through an online platform like Zoom or whether it's face-to-face. Another factor to consider is the level of conflict as well. So I mentioned some of the work that I've done. We've had a group of farmers who have been in a room together talking to government bodies about some potential legislation which will heavily affect them. So you need to know what level of conflict will be in the room and how to manage that. So that's something that you you need to think about and ask if your facilitator has got experience of that. So that's in terms of planning. In terms of the actual event and the topic, one thing that can really take quite a lot of time to get to the bottom of over a number of weeks actually is, what are your objectives? What is it that you want to achieve from the event, from the facilitated event? So we generally aim for 3 objectives, and they need to be as smart as possible in terms of specific, measured, time-bound, realistic, and achievable. So it does help to keep asking you as a client yourself what it is you want to achieve, and that's very much then linked to what you want to walk away with. So if you've had an event and everyone absolutely loved it, everyone got on really, really well, everyone had a great time, but all you've got at the end of that is lots of smiley faces on post-it notes or lots of vague words on a concept board, then in the cold light of day, the next day, you're going to think, cripes, that was a lot of time and effort. What have we got from that? So your objectives and your outcomes are obviously very closely matched and really do take quite a lot of thinking about. And that affects also who you invite to that event as well, because you need to know who is going to be responsible for taking that forward in the room, who is accountable for any decisions that you take, who do you need to consult, and who you might need to inform. So all of those things are factors in making sure that you have an event that everyone feels that they are in the right place and they're part of that decision-making process. And then lastly, a little bit about showstoppers. So things could grind to a halt if you haven't considered people's, if you like, hidden disabilities. So in terms of making sure that your facilitator will perhaps put out a request, or you yourself as the client, about people's needs. It might be that they come from different faith groups. It might be that they need assistive technology. It might be that they need to have regular breaks, or need to know when those breaks are. So they might need to have that marked up on the agenda well in advance, knowing that, that they might have particular needs that need to be borne in mind. So do think about the way that you can include as many people as possible and make it a comfortable experience for everybody. I'm sure it doesn't need to be said, but having a technical facilitator, so a co-pilot who is not fronting the event, but is there to make sure there aren't any technical glitches, that needs to be considered, and that could be a price consideration as well. But certainly if it's an online event, that's still an awful lot cheaper than hiring a room and having a lunch, etc., and everybody's travel time. But certainly you need a technical facilitator to ease the way. And then linked to that, things like who's going to be the note taker. Will it be someone in-house, or will it be one of the people who you commission as part of your facilitated exercise? And also whether you're going to record, and if people are happy for you to record as well. So those are some of the tricky questions that that I've thought and experienced and need to get the answers to smooth the way. So yeah, back to you, David. Any thoughts?
Thank you, Suzanne. Any thoughts from our floor then? Any questions on what Suzanne has mentioned there? That was your moment. Yes, we have a question there in the chat. Do you want to go ahead with that?
Sure. So question from Dan. How do you assure confidentiality and protection of proprietary, so relationships, non-disclosure, client information, ethical practice, etc.?
That's when you're inviting people to an event, certainly in terms of what we have in the UK, which is the GDPR. So that's a directive on disclosure of information. You just have to make sure that you're compliant, and in terms of inviting people, you would use your blind carbon copy option in your email. You would not keep any details of personal emails, and you would get permission from people before you send information out to them. And you would need to keep updating that, making sure that people are comfortable with information that you are asking from them.
So thank you, Suzanne. Does that answer your question, Dan?
My question had more to do with your contracting with facilitators, and how do you protect your network, maybe your client relationships and facilitator relationships, confidential information that is shared in the work. Things of that sort. So
Okay.
more around, with your facilitation network, the assets that you bring to bear.
You would only keep information as long as you needed it. You'd have a policy to not keep any more information than you needed or any longer than required.
Right. We're not going to do a didactic on decision.
Sorry about that. Just muted them.
So I think it is just being aware of what the statutory regulations are for that country, and maybe having a standard form which you agree, so that both parties feel comfortable with what is being shared and how much information is being shared. So you probably get a general disclaimer for them to sign up to, I would say.
We have a short, basically whenever we engage with anyone we basically have it's a shorthand version of our contractor agreement, really, so that we essentially have this person's working from this period to this period, everything covered inside this is covered. If it's not disclosed at the event or on the website, then it's considered as protected or proprietary information.
Okay, I hope that helps.
Thanks, Suzanne.
Thank you, Suzanne. James, go ahead.
Just taking the question from Paul in the chat to Suzanne. As clients, do you have a flat rate expectation of rates for facilitators, or does your procurement process allow you to differentiate between a fairly simple workshop versus a much more sensitive, challenging intervention requiring a more experienced facilitator at a higher day rate? Actually, no. We have a standard contract, and it's a standard amount per day, whether that's a high conflict event, complex event, or a simpler event. So no, there's an expectation that if we're bringing in a facilitator, it's going to be a more complex issue. So we would be expecting it to be a fairly high level of complexity, because we have a network of internal facilitators, and I'm one of them. But if we need to be impartial and it involves our business, then that's when we might go out to an external contractor, but it is a standard day rate. Thanks, Suzanne. Does that answer your question, Paul?
Yes, indeed. And I know Suzanne's situation quite well, but I was interested in the other clients as well. Of whether we'll have that. So I'm aware of Suzanne's situation. Great, thank you.
Just one more comment in the chat, Suzanne. Did I hear that you need 46 weeks to plan for a facilitated event? Not 46, 4 weeks to 6 weeks, and that's an ideal world. I think in terms of managing everybody's stress, that's a comfortable period of time. Of course, sometimes you have to do it a lot faster than that. And we allow 4 to 6 weeks to make sure that everyone's comfortable with that. This is a public sector. I think the private sector might expect more demanding timescales, but I'm speaking from a public sector point of view. Great, thank you, Suzanne. James, did you want to add to the rates discussion?
Yeah, I'll say I'm giving you the candid version of it. with set packages of work, essentially they've given us our price, which we've agreed to a set price over a 9-month period of time. So essentially we've agreed to what we can afford. Sorry, it's been agreed what can be afforded before we've even got to it. So essentially we have to then work out what can be afforded within the budget. So we have an idealistic rate that we will put in for facilitators. And we do have sort of we do have a bit of a differentiation between if they have a bit of a cross background or they have the right background, and we know that their rates will vary as well. If their speciality is very specific to what we're trying to do, then we'll bring them in. But yeah, that's we have an aspirational rate. And then we have what can realistically be fit within the package. And then we have what our friends or what people who you know will agree to do for this life-saving job.
I just have a question there, James, about a banded rate. It's the first time can you maybe clarify for myself, maybe for other people, what a banded rate is?
Yeah, so we have different roles at different positions. So when you cost up a proposal, you essentially we will have one person on at £450 a day. We have this person on at £350 a day. We have this person on at 2. So we will have at certain roles and they will have a certain rate. And then you could have the same person doing the same job, but more experience, you would put them in at a slightly higher rate. And this is essentially the finger in the air calculations that you're doing when you're filling in the costing, when you're costing up a proposal or costing up a large package of work, because it's very much a case of this is what it should or might cost, but not necessarily what it will cost at when it comes to actually going in for it. So we always review this. If we win a contract, when it comes to the piece of work, we will then review what's actually needed. So we've budgeted this much money for it, and then within the budget, what the rates can we actually afford to do this, and have we underspent in other areas so we can actually afford to pay this person properly now.
Okay, thanks, James. Anybody else have any questions for Suzanne or for James, or anything James may have said or Suzanne has said that you would like to seek clarification on before we move on to Roberta? Tony has a question there.
So Suzanne, I'm first of all, go back to James. James, to me, isn't a client. He's more of a middleman. You're a client. You're soliciting bids for people to come in and facilitate. So how does a facilitator get on your list of preferred suppliers, or do they have to register with the government's procurement process? I'm not familiar with the UK procurement process.
We procure a contract for facilitators. I think it's every 3 or 5 years. So we have a roster of facilitators. There are 3 companies on our books at the moment. The Environment Agency does use a lot of facilitators, more I would say than some other government departments. So I can't speak for the government departments in terms of them having facilitators on a roster, but it does tend to be for a reasonable length of time, unless it's under a certain price limit. And then you can make what we call a single tender action, where if it's under a threshold, you can use someone who isn't on a roster.
Yeah, thank you. The reason for my question is I do sense that some of the people on this call are really attending thinking, how can I get onto these rosters? How can I get access to this business? That's I think what they're here for. So maybe I'm wrong.
Well, for the EU, which obviously Britain has left, but there is the official journal of the European Union, which will put out tenders on contracts over a certain price. I would have thought, James, you might be able to offer more information, but certainly we do put out contracts for tender, and it used to be through the official journal of the European Union. I'm not actually quite sure how we will be procuring in the UK from here on in, but there will be something on our website, gov.uk.
All right, thanks for that.
Thank you, Suzanne. Anybody else? Okay, I think we've all the questions on chat. Yes, okay, so we can move over now to Roberta. our drugs dealer.
Okay, so
Oh, it's you, Roberta.
it's my turn
Thank you,
now.
Suzanne.
Thank you for all the information shared till now by Suzanne and James. It was really interesting, and it made me think, how can I make a connection between what they said and what I want to share with you? In general, my aim is to find ways to connect the dots, and that's why I named like this my intervention, because whenever I think of facilitation, I have in mind this role of facilitator. It's not only to be present there to make the people comfortable in sharing and reaching some results that they want to reach, but also to connect somehow things in their experience or learning lessons or objectives from the stakeholders that hired them. This requires a specific pool of skills and a lot of talent. I have here with me some friends from Romania, and maybe they will confirm or not, but facilitation is rather newest concept in Romania, because when we speak about the sessions, meetings, events, we don't have in mind facilitator for it. In general, I have the same issue inside my company, because I have managers who have sessions with their teams, either trainings, either meetings, and they don't perceive themselves as facilitators. They perceive themselves as leaders of the team or provider of processes, but not facilitator. And somehow it's important also to define what a facilitator has to do, at least in my country. I don't have experience in other countries. Maybe the situation is different, but at least in Romania, this is a fact. When I think also about connecting the dots, I have in mind what Suzanne was saying, to take time for planning. And in this respect, I think it's important also to take time to define
Okay, we have lost Roberta.
She's
Roberta
frozen, yeah.
got cut out a moment ago. We give her a bit of time to maybe get connected again. In the meantime, I'm going to ask James 2 or 3 questions, quite straightforward questions. James, don't worry. You mentioned LinkedIn profiles. It's nice to have a good, exportable. What type of profiles do you look at and kind of go, oh my God, that's a mess, or that's beautiful, perfect, from a facilitator's LinkedIn profile, what's a beautiful LinkedIn profile? What should be on there?
Having the full history, having no gaps, having showing a bit of variety in the background as well, showing what you've completed sort of in terms of projects, things that essentially could be used as use cases or business cases, so that we don't have to ask you to produce and provide it. Essentially, we can just go onto your site, onto your profile, hit a button, and then copy paste, and then export and send that PDF off into the tender. Yeah, it's just the completeness. So essentially, just a couple of paragraphs, not waffling on too much as well. Essentially, like the War and Peace and how wonderful you were, talking in the right person, but just kind of facts, figures, what's going on. If I can hit a button, and if you go into your own profile, hit a button, export it. If you looked at that as a CV, would it be good enough to include or send to someone very quickly? So that's kind of how we operate.
Waterfall methodology, is that a technical world thing, or
yeah, it's a technical world thing. It's waterfall and agile are the two sort of software development methodologies, and it's kind of how pretty much software gets created, or how it got created.
So I'm back.
All right, thank you, James. Thank
Sorry.
you. Welcome back,
May
Roberta.
I continue?
Yes, you can.
You know, this is in fact one of the lessons of this pandemic. To have a good network, it's a very important resource in
One of the
order to
best-
facilitate properly.
One of my best investments in the
Yeah.
pandemic was a cable.
Yeah, it's true. Now the cable is shared with my boy and maybe he uses it too much.
Fine.
Anyhow, I wanted to continue somehow with what for me it's very important to connect the session that you are going to facilitate with the objectives and with the expectations of the participants. And this is, as I already said, it's something that it is a criteria of choosing a facilitator. If he is really in the process and if he or she really wants to do an appropriate, a relevant contribution, I think it's important somehow not only to be a good facilitator, not only to have all the resources at hand, but to connect himself to what is needed from him, from the participants and from the stakeholder also. Also for me, as an internal provider, I discovered, because I am trainer in a company that promotes medical drugs. And also for me, it's somehow important to do all the steps that an external facilitator also has to do. I discovered myself that I have to sell the project that I want to implement inside the company towards the stakeholder that will be the beneficiary. So I somehow, it's important to follow all the steps that we ask from an external facilitator, to follow them ourselves. What I have also as important point in my mind whenever I'm dealing with an external facilitator is somehow to have a flow, everything to have a reason, everything to be on with a purpose. Because I attended today a very nice exercise together with some of you about check-in and check-out exercises. And it reminded me the importance of putting everything in the same story, to have all the resources, to have all the moments of the process in the same story and to have a purpose for them, not to have sessions only for fun or to have sessions only to fill the gaps, but to give a sense to everything what happens there as experience. And if I would add something in order to connect the dots and to be a learning experience, valuable learning experience for everybody, or even not learning, an experience valuable for everybody, would be this: to have sense and purpose in what you provide as facilitator, or I provide as a trainer inside the company where I'm working. Apart from that, I found a very funny picture about what a facilitator has to have as skills. And this reminds me somehow with an exercise that we did at a certain moment. What are we doing during a day when we facilitate? And if you list everything, it's amazing how many things you are doing as facilitator. I will share this picture with you because it's nice to be shared and to be seen, in order to see that we are doing a lot. Sometimes it's important also to have faith in you and to be sure that you are equipped with everything which is needed for being a good facilitator. This is also a thing that I'm searching for in a facilitator, to have trust and to have confidence in himself or herself. This is what I wanted to share. It was funny to discover all the things that we are doing as facilitator. And I'm pretty sure that all these elements are useful for a facilitator. More or less, this is what I wanted to share with you. So be prepared to match the objectives and expectations of everybody which is included in the project. Be prepared to provide a purposeful experience, and try to be sure that all the results and expectations are connected somehow with next steps to be followed by the participants or by the persons involved in the process. So this is what I wanted to mention. If there are questions, I'm here to answer to them.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Roberta. There's another great question by Dan. Do you find that it's effective to lead your marketing with facilitation or with subject matter expertise? Subject matter expert who facilitates, or a facilitator with expertise?
Yeah, it is a good question. I think that it depends. It depends. I think it is a great answer in a lot of questions. Sometimes it's very important to have a subject matter expert when you need guidance towards a certain information, when you need guidance, or when you want that session to provide the relevant information for the participants. Sometimes it's important to have a facilitator also who is not maybe subject matter expert, but who knows how to lead the flow and who knows how to arise in the participants the most valuable questions. Sometimes a facilitator is a good facilitation means not finding the answers, but finding the right questions to ask yourself or to follow afterwards when the facilitation ended. So it depends very much on the topic. It depends very much on what you want to achieve. I'm not sure if I responded, or if
do you find that your clients have a preference? I mean, do you find that, you know, when clients come out and looking for facilitation services, are they saying, I need a facilitator with expertise, or do I need, are they that explicit, or is there a more other factors like relationship or network, or, you know, what are they asking for?
In general, it's true that whenever I have to start a project and I need facilitator from outside, one who has experience, or one who has good recommendations, or one with whom we have had a good previous experience are preferred. In the same time, if the person who wants to have a session of facilitation is, how can I say, mature enough or responsible enough, he can understand the value of a person who maybe is not a subject expert, but he knows how to deal with the audience and how to lead the process. But in generally speaking, yes, one with experience and one which has a good image in the market has a preferred position, a pole position.
I have just to come back to something you said there about the questions, Roberta, and I'm going to read something very short from a book that I discovered recently by Eric Vogt, Juanita Brown, and David Isaacs. And you will have to excuse my German. This is one German word. I do not speak German. There's a job title of Director Grundsatzfragen. I did my best.
Very clear.
Okay. And this translates from German as the Director of Fundamental Questions. And I'm quoting this from the book. Some of the larger companies have an entire department of Grundsatzfragen. These are the people who are always thinking about what the questions will be. Of course, these people are only in the German companies headquartered in Germany, such as Daimler, Bayer, Siemens, or SAP. If the German company is acquired by a US company, they usually eliminate the good Fragen positions. I'm quoting from a book, but I just think it's interesting, this idea of a director of fundamental questions. And maybe some of you know this, it's the Art of Powerful Questions, which is available on the internet. So
I would connect, and I see that Suzanne and James have a hand up. I would connect this with the question before. We live in a very volatile and unpredictable world. And I think the value here is for those who can prepare not to have certainties, but to be prepared for uncertainties. And sometimes one with experience, it based his experience on things that are in the past. I think those who can predict somehow what will come in the future, and those who are open and flexible enough to learn, even if they are experts, I think these persons have a more value, at least for me, and I appreciate them very much.
okay, thank you, Suzanne. I see your hand up, and
yeah.
James, has your question been answered? I'm not sure.
I just wanted to back up what Roberta said, in that sometimes it's very useful for your facilitator not to be a subject matter expert, because, for example, working with scientists, you can often articulate ideas where they may be assuming that everybody knows. It just, if you are outside the topic a little bit, you can have that slightly wider view and ask questions which may seem obvious to them, but not to everybody else. So I think there is real value in having a subject matter expert. Having said that, they do need to have a briefing on the background of the topic so that they have a level of competence, so that they have some authority in the session. So I think that's a useful issue to raise. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Okay, James, you had a question.
Well, it's actually just following on to that as well. So I agree. So in terms of the subject matter expertise, is only really ever needed. We only ever really needed subject matter experts where the outcome of the actual facilitation was that it was educational for those that were there. So essentially, it was that the people there were supposed to be learning or growing. So essentially, if it was for the benefit of the actual if it was for the benefit of the participants to actually be learning or to growing or to have something where they're guided or they are actually benefiting from the facilitation, then someone having having some subject matter expertise to guide would be useful. If it's where it's a fact-finding session if the person who's benefiting is actually the person who's actually procured the actual facilitation, then not having the background allows for people to get the blank canvas, really. And the third type of person that I would put into there is essentially reputation setting. So if this is someone that if you're bringing in a facilitator and they're going to be doing high profile engagement on behalf of your company to basically go out and speak and sell on your behalf and be the only point of contacts that your business has with your client, but also with all these other stakeholders, then if this is the key moment, then the person who's the facilitator, we would want that person to have that confidence or have the charisma or have the ability to actually represent and show that it's a purely ego thing, but it's a commercially driven thing as well, that we need to know that the client had a great experience of using that facilitator. And that's on a purely, but that's usually where the reputation setting one is something that happens on the first couple of times of going and meeting with that client, where you're sort of trying to make a good impression. But it happens quite often. Essentially, there's a lot of money that's being spent on so someone's got to a point where they need a facilitator. They're not at a point of not spending money. They're at a point where they're about to chuck a couple of million towards a big project, and these don't tend to fall under small chunks of cash. So being able to show that you've got someone that can, so that's the third category of someone is, have they got the charisma to actually be the face for what I'm working on, which is.
Thank you, James. Okay, anybody else have any questions at this point? I have another question for James, if nobody has one. Can you give us 2 or 3 ways of reducing stress for a buyer? You mentioned reducing stress earlier on. So how can we de-stress our buyers?
Once you've gone through the process once they've gone through the process a few times, it's always, the process is always going, unfortunately, the process is always going to be stressful. The clients I work with don't tend to buy facilitation alone, but as a component of what they're actually delivering. So essentially what you're doing is basically is a key building block of what I'm selling. So essentially I will need 5 facilitation sessions in order to deliver what I'm procuring. So I will buy facilitators time or facilitators blocks of facilitators time to actually work on this. So being open to being included on tenders, if someone comes back to you and says, please, can I include you on this? Being open to that. But not understanding it's not necessarily that this is a guaranteed thing, and basically that it's basically the more you put into the pipeline, the more you're likely to actually get out the back of it. So that's my short.
Okay, thank you. Some interesting comments there. I put the name of the book. Thanks for the reminder there, Manal. I put the name of the book in there for you. I like Tony's, one of his favorite interventions is, let me ask you a stupid question from my book of stupid questions. Oh yes, I like that. Tony's still here. Yes, there he is. Okay, thank you for that, Tony. And there was another one there about the corporate fool that Dan shared with us, Gordon Mackenzie, formerly of Hallmark, at the title of Corporate Fool. Yes, indeed, it is very Shakespearean. So anybody else have any things I've said to people that I'm an expert in areas that I don't know anything about. I don't know if anybody has anything else to say. It's a good question about being a neutral facilitator who has a speciality. It's a bit of a twist. Does anybody have anything to say about that? If a client is looking for a neutral facilitator with specialities, how they manage that? Yes, Paul.
Well, I just to say, I think the area we've drifted into there is an interesting one in terms of both client confidence and facilitator persona, if you like, because you're talking about the ability to place yourself lower in the room, not the subject expert, and yet still hold the room. So you're inviting other people to be the experts in matters, and they'll think about corporate fool and stupid questions and things, and yet you have to be able to do it whilst also very clearly still holding the room and holding the space for everybody. And I think, talking with young facilitators in the IAF in some sessions last year, there's this whole tension, people and then young facilitators, of needing to feel confident and like they're worth it, and not being willing to put that vulnerability out there and say, well, I don't actually know, you tell me what's going on, you tell me, I'll ask the stupid questions, without losing your position as the holder of the process and holder of the space. So there's a whole interesting area there, I think, for both clients and facilitators. Thank you, Paul. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Yes, Tony. Sorry. Yeah, Tony. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I had to leave the meeting for a little while and came back, so I hope I'm not repeating anything. But earlier on, Suzanne mentioned that when you're setting up a session, make sure you got 3 objectives, and I think that's what she said, and expected outcomes. I generally only have 1 session purpose, very clear session purpose. I don't mix it up, have more than 1 session purpose, and then a list of expected outcomes. What are the prizes we're going to walk away with at the end of this meeting at 4:30 or 4:30 tomorrow? What are the prizes we're going to walk away with? That then keeps everybody on track. My job then is to design the various thinking steps that this group will need to go through to take us from diverging to converging, so that we can walk away with those prizes at the end of that session. So I'm not, David just said about an expert. I always tell everybody I know a little bit about a lot of things, but I'm not an expert in anything except process and the steps that you need to go through. So I don't worry about having, I like to know some of the language that they use, but believe me, they don't need another opinion in the room from me. So, I just have to take them through the thinking steps. Hope that's clear.
One thing I saw recently was that this is your conversation, not mine. which is quite snappy.
You know, sometimes you can ask a group, so what question do we need to ask now?
Yeah.
You're there just to really set them on a path, and then sometimes get out of the way because you're in the way.
And you could, it's the interesting about the fool, because my background is in, this is how I discovered facilitation, is in English language training. And, you know, I walk into situations all the time where could be maintenance or, something like that, where I don't know about. And, they turn around to me and they'd say, they tell me something I know about, like maybe a basic operating thing in an engine. And they say, and you know the way an engine works. And I just go, no. And they go, are you serious? And they say, okay, I see what you're doing. You just want me to talk me through the process. So you can actually feign, ignorance sometimes, just to get, in a playful way, and get away with it.
I did a session in the States a few years ago. It's for the American Society for Immunogenetics and Histocompatibility. I can't even spell those, right? But I took them through a 2-day strategic planning session. At the end, one of the participants came up to me and said, "Oh, you must have a pretty extensive background in medicine." I said, "Not me. Don't have any background in medicine," because they're doing all the thinking through the stuff. I don't have to have an opinion on that. Anyway, sorry, I interrupted.
Anybody else? Manal, I think.
Yeah, we just have one more question from Dan, another quick question. Dan, were you addressing this to any particular panelist or to anyone in general, or who does this question go to?
Just in general, again, back to the conversation about the discovery of opportunities for work. Where are they coming from in your experience? So in my work, sometimes it's, oh, brand new, I heard of you. Would you please come and do this work for us? Sometimes it's, you did really great on X. Now we would like you to do Y, which is completely unrelated and may or may not be part of my practice. And I guess I'm wondering, getting a sense of that. Does that happen? And does it happen frequently? Because there seems to me, again, my thought process here and listening, there seems to be a difference between the initial buying and contracting and buying and agreement, and then the, okay, this is what we do to create the value that we create. And it's hard to, sometimes those, you gotta get the business so you can create the value. So you have to play the game to get the business. And then you got to play a slightly different game to earn and to keep the promises. Thoughts?
Yes, the playing two games thing feels very much in the line of how it feels. We're bidding for work that's kind of in the millions. That's kind of we're spending money and we're trying to work out what's going to happen in the future. And you're right, it's kind of where it's coming down to the wire of like, all right, now we actually need to do this. So essentially the due diligence process kind of kicks in a lot later, and usually within the time frame of where we know that we need to get this in, when we know it's been confirmed, particularly. It's then, right, so who's going to do this? Who's actually going to do this? And then the unfortunate thing also is that when we've actually been given the work, we actually finally get to talk to the client. We don't get to talk to the client during the bidding process, where the client doesn't actually know what's going on for the 3 to 6 months that they're actually putting the bid in. We don't speak to the client. We're not allowed to. We're literally not allowed to speak to the client to actually find out what's going on. It's only when it's actually been issued that you can actually go and have your first meeting and find out, well, no, you didn't really need this. What you really needed was X, Y, Z. And it's then at that point that we've no longer got a 6 to 9 month window to actually find the perfect person to put them down. We've actually now probably got a 3-week window where they've kicked the heels to actually get things in place. And then actually finally, we've actually now got 2 or 3 weeks to find the perfect person to start doing something. Sorry, that's just my experience, but that's probably not what goes on actually with the much more organized experience of. Suzanne probably has a much more different experience.
I think Suzanne was going to say something there, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, we do ask for an amount of lead time often we don't get it if the people are very senior. And then you just need to be very rigorous, as I said before, about what objectives are we seeking. And I think as someone said as well, what prizes do you want to take away? Those are the key things, your objectives, what you want to achieve, what your outputs and your outcomes are. And if your client has a clear idea of that, then it doesn't take quite as long, but often they don't. So you've just got to be very, very assertive in getting those from them. And then you can save a lot of time, or that's where your time needs to be, I should say, because then you rely on your skills as a facilitator to come up with sessions and techniques in order to get those outcomes. Thanks.
I guess what I'm hearing too is just adding value at every stage to reassure, to keep the client and the stakeholders feeling like, yes, I want to continue our relationship through these various stages.
Yeah, it's having authority, but a little bit of humility, because you're not a subject matter expert, but I really don't think you need to be. You just need to have confidence in the skills to get those prizes at the end of the day, because that's really what the client wants.
Thank you. Any other comments from anybody? Okay, well, what I suggest we do now, we're going to give you something very precious, which is thinking time. Okay, we're going to give you a lot of thinking time in modern terms, which is 2 minutes. Okay, we're going to give you 2 minutes of thinking time to think back on what you heard today, look at your notes, maybe go back through the chat and think about 1 or 2 prizes or nuggets of wisdom that you will take away with you today. And then, so 2 minutes, we will to a breakout room. You can leave your cameras on, off, whatever makes you comfortable. And if you could give us maybe a thumbs up in the reaction section there at the bottom to let us know when you're ready. So 2 minutes is good? Okay, I'll put on my timer here. Okay, so 2 minutes. Okay, our 2 minutes has passed. So. So who would like to jump in there first and tell us? I saw the question there from Manal, which yes, the gem of wisdom you would like to walk away with, or to give to a friend who wasn't unable to attend. Okay, so tell us, who was like to go with first?
So I'll start it and I'll pass the baton. So I think my main takeaway, and I think I sort of already knew this, but it's just the power of networking, especially to break into places like the government. And I've had personal experiences with that as well. So just that, I guess, is my big takeaway, and all of the book recommendations. And I'm seeing more trickling in now. So just making note of that. And I will pass it over to James.
Unfortunately, I had to run around, been having to sort myself out. No, it's been good to hear different perspectives and to kind of get. It's been good to see that there's some common issues across the different sectors. So it's been quite good to see that. Well, it's not good to see that there's the same issues exist everywhere, but it's kind of it's reassuring. So no, that's my takeaway.
Thank you.
And thanks for giving us a bunch of gems, James.
Yeah.
So who would you like to pass it on to?
I usually go top. So Suzanne, you're next on there.
That's fine. I would like to say that I love this idea of prizes to take away. It's so much less civil servanty than outcomes or output. So that's a really good real world tangible word that I can use that really helps focus the client's mind, because it is so important. So that was a really valuable insight, and I loved all the book references as well. So I am going to go to Carmen.
Well, my takeaway from this session, of course, all the books. And related to this, I'm really interested in finding the right questions. So I will take with me that it's not important to be an expert in a field, but it's important to put the right question and the run and how to run the process as a facilitator. So don't worry if you're not an expert. Just read the books and find the right questions.
So who's it for now, Carmen?
That's Roberta, I guess.
Thank you, Carmen. I think I want to express my gratitude, because every time when we meet different people, we are richer through their ideas shared and through their wisdom in their experience so far. What I would take away as, and I would suggest as a prize for everybody, is our diversity. It's wonderful to be so diverse and to have so much diversity in facilitation in all our countries. One common point that I perceived as important for all of us is to provide value. Even if we are so diverse and we have so many different techniques in facilitation, the one point which rests is to provide value. And if this value is provided through the questions that we are encouraging the people to ask themselves, or through the learning that we provide to them, I think this is worth spending time and energy in helping them to reach this value. And I will pass to James.
James already went.
James already went.
James, you said?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was not.
Paul or Nasli or myself.
Okay, Paul. Sorry. Paul.
I was very struck by our conversations about the power of the right question, both to the group you're with, but also to the client. If you get the group to the right question, that's hugely important. I'm also quite struck by the contrast in the conversations between buying facilitation where you can have very early direct contact with the facilitator and, you know, frame it all together and shape it all up, as opposed to being in a situation where you have to buy it through some large scale, you know, procurement platform, which then means you can't talk to them for 3, all those kinds of things. Those are very different experiences, both as a client and as a facilitator.
Thank you, Paul. Nasli.
I'm the last one, I guess. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, sorry. I already wrote this, but thanks for Roberto sharing top 10 qualities of a facilitator, because I always like guidelines and to have them like a summary when I'm trying to choose or to have a look or analyze something. And I also learned that it's not that easy. I mean, of course, it's an important part of this facilitation process, and it's almost like purchasing a program, maybe a program of different modules, and most of the points that we need to take care for that is almost similar to facilitation. And also it's good to learn that a facilitator doesn't have to be a SME. That's good to know, because I also prefer not being really expert on a topic, but try to help or give consultancy to people. So it was really excellent session, and thanks for your sharings.
Last but not least, David.
We can't hear
David,
you.
you're muted. We want to hear your gem.
Gem. Well, the actual, it's a bit like Suzanne's. The outcome is a prize. You know, it's which I think it's all in the words, isn't it? And I also like the idea of a showstopper. You know, the showstopper is you know, seeing the whole event as a show, as a big event. You know, what could be a showstopper? Yeah, I think it's important to clarify that Suzanne does not take 46 weeks to prepare a facilitated event. So
Like, wow.
meticulous preparation. So you know, what lost the contract? It was the 46 weeks thing. Could have killed it. Yeah, there's some terms I learned. The corporate fool. Let me ask you a stupid question, and yeah, so that's it. So the prize, I'll be using that. So what prizes do you want to win? Yeah. So listen, we're 4 minutes past the time. Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you Manal for co-hosting. Thank you James, Suzanne, Roberta for coming. And yes, the recording will be displayed somewhere on the site. You can have a look at the site on the recording site. It'll be there. And this is not finished. We'll be looking at all the information, going back through what has been said, the recommendations, and we will be publishing the buyer's guide later after. And I hope to see you again soon.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Take
everyone.
care. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for coming. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, David.
Yeah, well, there you go. So thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you all. Quiet group, no?
Yeah, quiet group.